In this video, I will be explaining and debunking the ridiculous myth about the Marvel Multiverse just being universal or multiversal or high hyperversal at best. And to do that, we will be touching up on some very important stuff that all Marvel fans should know, like the Jungian archetypes, Platonism and its uses in the verse, how the dimensions work and what they entail by several contexts, how infinities work in the verse, and of course, there will be serious breakdown and logical deduction with scans from the comic as evidence. I did this kind of video in the past, but they are all outdated. Trust me, this is the last and most effort I have put into a video so far, and if you watch at least halfway, then you can tell I am tired of the downplay I and the verse gets alongside hits. And I also know that Marvel gets to boundless and higher, so watch to find out. Also, do not forget to subscribe and help the verse so I can keep giving it the respect it deserves. As for DC fanbase, SCP and Cthulhu, I have a lot for you guys this year as well, including your cosmology guide, and let's begin. Let's start with the fact there are infinite timelines within the local multiverse, which creates new universes for each multiverse because there are infinite amount of multiverses within the local multiverse. So each multiverse or local universe has infinite amount of universes in them, which follows the M-theory rule, and are wave functions as well, containing infinite amount of dimensions. But aside the M-theory thing, which is hard to find more scans other than the one I referenced earlier, we have something called the crossroads of infinity, which contains infinite amount of dimensions. Now, the crossroads actually contains two main things, which is the negative zone and the positive zone or positive multiverse. I mean, it does contain a lot more other things which will be brought up, but these are the main things, right? The positive multiverse is what I just briefly explained. The negative zone is the opposite of that in terms of matter energy. It just contains antimatter, but it is equal and opposite to the positive multiverse. The positive multiverse contains infinite multiverses. Each multiverse contains infinite universes created from infinite timelines, and each universe contains infinite dimensions. Now, each universe containing infinite dimensions is likely not the case, but could be, and the reasoning for this is this. Know that each multiverse has infinite universes because of infinite timelines. Now, infinite timelines vary dimensionally. A 3D infinite timeline can't produce a fourth dimensional timeline, meaning each universe would be its own dimensionality, which would just birth infinite universes in a single universe, making a single universe or multiverse in a universe which is in a multiverse, and this is plausible because even atoms in Marvel contain a whole universe in them. Which is true when you think of things like the microverse and underspace, which rank higher dimensionally or existentially, because this is like higher levels I'm talking about. But they all follow the same rules, synonymous, which are quantum-based realms, and then we'll get to that sometime from now. Also, this is pretty consistent when you further realize the fact that each dimension shown in Marvel are from different universes because of different lores and things like the time stone. Now, the thing is each universe birthed a new universe, but not a new dimension. So each multiverse came to be being transfinite in nature because high 1B constructs are basically infinite dimensions, and the gap between each dimension is an aleph or infinitesimal gap. And within each of these dimensional constructs, which has its own universe, then has infinite universes for several infinite possibilities and probabilities, meaning that each multiverse in the local multiverse as a whole generalized term or positive multiverse is beyond infinitely wide and transfinitely transcendent as a whole, meaning that each multiverse out of infinite is actually multiversal because the further edge of the conceptual infinity beyond the transfinite expansion within each construct would be finite, to be true infinite in nature of if its wave function, because it needs more conceptual space for new infinities to be created, both as timelines and as universes, as even atoms are universal. These are further backed up with few scans from different universes out of the transfinite nature to be stated infinite in size or nature. And in the America's Chavez run, we are aware that Chavez visits the local multiverse a lot. Now, in this scan, we can see that there's space between dimensions of each universe or space between them, and these universes are infinitely expanding and created, which further backs up everything. And to top it up, Lifebringer Galactus does say that the space and time beyond or between the universes are beyond time and space, or doesn't exist, however you interpret it. It is definitely saying that it conceptually transcends these high 1B constructs, making the space alone universal. And then I'm trying to make this intellectually friendly. I could have just said since that the conceptuality is just based on cardinality, and the cardinality of the space outside of the universe is infinitely expanding or just beyond it, so which means it conceptually transcends it totally, and that's universal, simple and short. And here are further scans of infinite dimensions within the local multiverse as they are stacked upon and side by side to each other. Now, for those who would say that this is where Marvel caps at, because of course they lack seriously in knowledge or are very ignorant or just utterly probably low on IQ, meaning they act and talk like they have recession of knowledge via poor mental labor. This argument seals up everything. We have already proved casual high 1B to baseline multiversal of Marvel pretty casually, which we still have one or two things to mention after this, but before that, the argument to seal the deal that this is just the base layer of Marvel, we have something called the superflow. Now, before even that, some people would say something like prove this is Marvel's local multiverse. Chill. That's extremely easy to do. 1. Within the lower first multiverse in the Avengers run, while they introduced the Starbrand and Nightmask characters and Superflow, they basically refer to one of the universes as a local multiverse. And just the same way these universes have infinite dimensions each, the same way a collection of local universes would make up a local multiverse. 2. To further back this up, the superflow machine for this universe was introduced, and we see later that there are superflows for each universe, which is all synonymous to each other, and unless you are mentally incompetent, then you won't realize that with this scan. 3. Also, the local multiverse is also called the physical plane or deep space, which it has been called a lot of times. Deep space is the local multiverse with infinite multiverses, which contains infinite universes with infinite timelines, and each universe in the multiverse is high 1B. The multiverse itself is altered conceptually beyond the high 1B nature as something transfinite in nature but finite to another thing isn't reaching any cardinal infinity to the thing higher, making it cardinally lower, and this is pretty obvious without me going too deep, as I didn't even go deep, lol. Now this is another scan for the infinite multiverse, more for infinite universes. Another easy argument for this is just type 3 multiverse, which is the local multiverse. At the very least, I wanted to bring up Earth 616, but we will wait for that. Now, about the superflow. Just know that the superflow kind of varies. It exists as one of those realms with nexus natures. Of course, there's a superflow for each multiverse, or you can call it universe. Doesn't really inherently matter when you classify it as a generalized term supporting inner context to whatever law-abiding cosmology you're dealing with. The superflow actually transcends the multiverse each, and we have shown easy proof of each being at least high 1B. Meaning the superflow would be at least universal, since it conceptually transcends a high 1B construct, meaning it is beyond a high 1B space and time, which by nature, no matter the infinity is being stacked and expands, it won't get to 1A. Later on, we will get a deeper context of what the superflow is and its nexus nature. But the singular superflows are all within the crossroads simply because the superflows each hold these multiverses, and then all these multiverses are within the crossroads of infinity. The crossroads still conceptually transcends the superflow, but I don't have a lore-based guarantee that it is an Aleph gap. So this entire structure would just be higher into autoversal on a base, not even on a baseline scale. This is literally autoversal plus, or even a bit higher. So next up in the cosmology, we have infinities. How do infinities work in Marvel? Now, I'll be putting the original definitions and just explaining them. So you have the original definition on the screen while explaining, and I'll do the same thing for the Jungian archetypes when we get there. Ordinal numbers. So basically, this is a term used in the arrangement of things by numbering them. For example, you have first, second, third, and even things like one-dimensional, two-dimensional, three-dimensional. Next up are cardinal numbers. This is the term used to classify the cardinality of a set, which could be finite or infinite. For example, you have, set of 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 n. N is the representation of a number, so it's finite. You still have a quantification, which is a number. And you have, set of 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 w infinite, w plus 1, infinite plus 1, and it just continually. Now, how do ordinals and cardinals work together? While a cardinal number tells us how many elements a set contains, it gives no clue as to the ordering of the items in the set. We can indicate the position of a particular element within a set using something called an ordinal number. We use ordinal numbers, or just ordinals, every day in one way or another to denote order. So this isn't so hard. Knowing what ordinals and cardinals are, the relationship between them is as simple as using a spoon to eat rice, but the spoon isn't the damn rice. The ordinals or ordinal numbers used to arrange things to form what? Literally an order. Now the cardinals tell us how large a particular order is, but yet you can't figure how large an order is without knowing the order. Let's use Hilbert space dimensionality, or M theory, for example. You have the first dimension, second dimension, third, up to an infinite amount of dimensions. Now you know that 1, 2, and 3 are numbers of increases for something or for anything. These numbers are called natural numbers. Now, what are natural numbers? Natural numbers, as you can see on the screen, basically it is all synonymous. Now, then we know that the dimensions have an order, but that order is synonymous to cardinal because we know that the order can be finite or infinite. Since we understand this, how about we go over some terms that add up everything we will be talking about more for better understanding. So we already know and understand what natural numbers are. Now, what are real numbers? I'm just going to place this whole thing on the screen so you read it and I just explain. Now, this basically means that the real numbers are basically numbers which do not have a definite end to their existence. They usually form endless decimal numbers, which are numbers that come after a point. These numbers are called rational numbers. What are the rational numbers? Basically two integers, but the denominator shouldn't be 0. What are integers? Basically whole numbers that aren't fraction based but could be positive or negative. What are fractions? Basically a numerical quantity that is not a whole number. What are irrational numbers? Basically numbers that can give infinite decimals, but not when you use fractions of two integers. Basically all real numbers that are irrational numbers, which is easy. In other words, to make it easier, it is basically numbers that form decimal infinities, or basically square roots of all natural numbers that aren't perfect squares, meaning pi, Euler's number representing E, and the golden ratio. It is an aspect of the real numbers. Note, almost all irrational numbers are transcendental numbers except root of 2. This would be probably dived in more, but they are responsible for the science behind space-time, energy, and matter. And what are transcendental numbers? On the screen, but to understand better, an algebraic number is any complex number. And what are transcendental numbers? Now it's on the screen, but basically it has something to do with algebraic numbers, so This is definition for transcendental numbers, and this is definition for algebraic numbers. Now, basically transcendental numbers, as we pointed out earlier, they are under irrational numbers, and irrational numbers are infinitesimal numbers that all are square roots of all natural numbers, but not those that have perfect squares. And since they aren't perfect squares, but they are real numbers, but don't just form roots of a non-zero polynomial. Basically means their polynomial quotients don't equate to zero in a single problem, or quotients that have fractions as its coefficient instead of letters variable like two times, for example. Indeed, almost all real and complex numbers are transcendental numbers, since the algebraic numbers compose countable sets, while the set of real numbers and the set of complex numbers are both uncountable sets, and therefore larger than any countable sets. Understanding what has been said above, some people may be confused because now it states that almost, which is not almost all real and complex numbers are transcendental. Now, apart from the reason given there, which I have pointed out about them being infinite because they are irrational, while the algebraic numbers are infinite. The definition of algebraic numbers includes complex and real numbers that aren't infinite under the given explanation to why transcendental numbers aren't finite or algebraic, and this is pretty straightforward. Complex numbers and real numbers are only algebraic when their solutions end up with a rational coefficient because they simply have a non-zero polynomial in their problem. Not all irrational numbers are transcendental. For example, the square root of 2 is an irrational number, but it is not a transcendental number as it's a root of the polynomial equation x2 minus 2 equals 0, or 2x, whatever. People tend not to understand this and further go on to make very non-intellectual statements that George Cantor's transfinite explanation is infinite, which is just absurd to start with. And inside this, we are about to get a bit deeper. Now, what are alephes? Well, it will be on the screen, but check the definition. There's something very important, and that is at the ending. It says well ordered. Pay attention. Aleph naught or aleph zero, the smallest infinite cardinal number. The cardinality of the natural numbers is aleph naught or aleph zero. The term aleph null is also sometimes used. The next larger cardinality is aleph 1, and so on. Continuing in this manner, it is possible to define a cardinal number. Basically, the term alephs is used to denote or arrange sets of cardinality. Aleph is a Hebrew term that follows the ordinal rule. The concept and notation are due to George Cantor, who defined the notion of cardinality and realized that infinite sets can have different cardinalities. Basically, the aleph numbers just show that infinities can have sets, and one infinity can be greater than the other. The aleph numbers differ from the infinity commonly found in algebra and calculus in that the aleph measures the sizes of sets, while infinity is commonly defined as either an extreme limit of the real number line applied to a function or sequence that diverges to infinity or increases without bound, or as an extreme point of the extended real number line. Basically means that the way aleph quantifies larger infinities isn't the same way algebra and calculus quantify it. And algebra are rational numbers which don't inherently have infinity, but that's under certain conditions, like I explained earlier, with the transcendental numbers and what real numbers are as a whole. Aleph null, I'll put the definition right, but basically means that aleph null is the smallest only when it is infinite but countable, like sets of different mathematical terms such as algebra, even odd rational numbers. For those who don't still get, an even number is infinite if you decide to keep counting, but it is finite because it isn't all numbers but just the even ones. But this can truly occur if the axioms of countable choice, a weaker version of the axiom of choice, holds, then aleph 0 is smaller than any other infinite cardinal. Aleph 1. Basically, an infinite amount of aleph 0 creates aleph 1. Axiom of choice. Basically, the axiom of choice is used to organize and order the aleph numbers. which by transfinite induction is ordered because it follows an ordinal layout of whatever cardinal it contains, be it finite or infinite. Or transfinite induction is an extension of mathematical induction to well-ordered sets. For example, to sets of ordinal numbers or cardinal numbers. Transfinite induction requires proving a base case used for 0, a successor case used for those ordinals which have a predecessor, and a limit case used for ordinals which don't have a predecessor. This basically means that sets with predecessors can be counted, be it finite or infinite, because 1 is less than 2, but can be counted. Which includes the axiom of choice implies that every infinite set has an Aleph number as its cardinality, is equine, and thus the initial ordinals of the Aleph numbers serve as a class of representatives for all possible infinite cardinal numbers. So each Aleph number truly then doesn't need an axiom of choice or countable choice, but using it isn't abolished. The Aleph numbers, as explained, are already ordered, and each Aleph number is inaccessible to the other. Now, people and even I have mistaken these things, which is saying Aleph, inaccessible, and infinitesimal are the same. Now, Aleph, axioms, and inaccessible are all relatively the same thing, but infinitesimal is different. What are infinitesimals or infinitesimal? See the definition, but basically means that surreal and hyperreal numbers are what is needed or something to be non-existential to the other. And the reason they aren't similar to those above is because it isn't in standard real numbers. What are surreal numbers? You have them on the screen, right? The surreal numbers also contain all transfinite ordinal numbers. The arithmetic on them is given by natural operations. You guys take note of this. I have explained a lot extremely well. Now, knowing all this, in simple and short, what is George Cantor's transfinite arithmetic? I'm just going to drop this on the screen, to be honest. Now, note, as a consequence of Cantor's proof that the real numbers are uncountable and the rationals countable, it follows that almost all real numbers are irrational. Basically, knowing that George Cantor came up and influenced the concept of Aleph's axioms of choice, the inaccessible cardinals, and all being under the transfinite numbers, which are transcendental numbers. With all this detailed and simple explanation with the explanation of transfinite numbers, we know that infinities have sets which are transfinite cardinals, and the arrangements of the sets of infinities are transfinite ordinals. To talk about this further, you need to recognize inaccessible cardinals, which is a clear part of it, and how does it work. To put this into one final explanation and brief it all up, I'm just gonna place this on the screen about the cardinal successor and uncountable cardinals. But yeah, let's move. Now, another important thing is knowing the difference between real and natural numbers. I don't have time, there isn't time to see all that, but I'm just gonna leave it on the screen so you can read it up. The difference between reals and natural numbers. So just know that real numbers are larger than natural numbers, but natural numbers are also infinite. Transfinite cardinals in Carl Jung's work. So there isn't much time to for me to say it, but I'm just gonna leave it on the screen as well. You guys have to read all this, it's very important. Carl Jung's work, and I put up the scans for the right. It's stated right. So now for the big brain part, and which is how is transfinite or how transfinite numbers in Marvel. Well, not to waste time here with the understanding of everything. The first thing is that a lot of you have seen this scan and really try your best to disregard it with grotesque knowledge and understanding of George Cantor's work, which I would classify your knowledge as infinitesimals, to be honest. Now, this is valid for the fact that the name of the creator was referenced, even some sort of visual drawing of him as well, which alone is enough to apply his lore, since author's intent is very crystal clear here, and Occam's razor would support this without much assumptions, as this claim is positive to the reference of the subject and the intent of the author to apply that subject, which also goes with Carl Jung. Now, Doctor Strange really broke this down that to even understand the multiverse from even the smallest thing is understanding that infinity is relative, and he starts with what? The simple explanation of Alif No, which is the smallest infinite countable number, which has bijection with the natural numbers, meaning it is transcendental and it is irrational. Already simply implies that the multiverse is likely transfinite without even going far. He then further talks about man trying to understand the multiplicity of the multiverse or universes, which does include all these great minds, and he says the list could go on. But one man turned to mathematical arithmetic, which symbolizes God. Remember, as he says, the list will go on, which includes everyone who tried to debunk Carl Jung, and even helped him, which includes using the axiom of choice to organize the transfinite numbers of the multiverse. Now, he says it is a symbol of God, which is the absolute infinity, which includes the countable and uncountable transfinite numbers, which is what you classify as boundless in fiction, and it is linked to the continuum hypothesis, as I stated before. The rest explanation is summarized like how I did it before. Each layer of the multiverse is an Aleph gap, and there are infinite layers or transfinite layers of existence in the multiverse, and all are inaccessible to the previous. This is just a start. Knowing this, the next scan says the human mind can't fathom this, which falls back to Jungian archetypes as denoted to be incomprehensible and something of God's nature, and then archetypes are infinite or transfinite, and if you were to even think of it as 2D, it will still form an infinite spectrum, and then it just continually infinite in dimensions to man. Some people still tend to not understand this simple scan, where it simply talks about how man views and wonders the complexity of their space and time. They wonder if it has boundaries, and their multiverse, which is the local multiverse, is a cosmic pond to the rest of the cosmos. It says that man's universe has its own infinite variants of universes explored by the race of watchers, and all these share the same 3D spectrum, which is hypothetical. Let me explain this part better for what comes next. Earlier in the scan, after it says that if we view it as 2D, it will be an infinite spectrum. It then says, with quote, that at the center of this actual centerless spectrum, because of man's behavior, they can place it in a third dimension. But the Earth universe, which is home of Gaia and actually has archetypal lineages from Cadmon and Plato, which would be brought up later, also everything came from Gaia. Anyways, they say that as they move away in quote from the center of this hypothetical spectrum, they encounter other universes, especially even the human world is expressed as 3D because of their behavior. This dimension isn't actually normal 3D as the text emphasizes, and beyond this is all possible 3D construct of infinity where natural laws are different, meaning this isn't talking about like just 3D spatial temporal dimensions. This is referring to planes of existence. The mortal plane is 3D but yet still transfinite even from a 2D view, and this contains infinite dimensions as explained prior to all this. Just that as of now, the cosmology has grown bigger and kind of better with placement of realms, while the older comics explain the nature of creation, as proven even from earlier comics that the crossroads contain infinite dimensions, which includes the negative zone, and the negative zone is part of this, and beyond this Hawambi and baseline auto construct you have the gods and demons, but this has been further pushed up in hierarchy even not so long after these comics. They then talk about nightmare and other spatial dimensions, but all these keep being referenced to man not comprehending it, and because of their ideas, these things exist, which still links to the collective unconscious. These aren't normal spatial dimensions, and they aren't even normal, as they are totally irrational and transcendental numbers, as I explained before. These are several real numbers on top of each other. This is literally the continuum hypothesis, and is further justifiable when you realize that it stops at 16-dimensional superspace of the Living Tribunal, which is still within eternity, because that's the anthropomorphic realm, and each dimensional transcendence contains infinite planes of reality, each having an inaccessible gap from what we consistently know, which are smaller pocket dimensions, which are still infinite. Now, more proof of this is even in the Chaos War comics. The realm of just Hera is called the Continuum and is an inaccessible gap blatantly stated, and also called an infinite gulf from Earth, meaning several transcendental numbers and infinite hierarchies of realms to pass. Or the eternity stating to contain so much embodies that he is transfinite. I have never seen where a multiversal structure that contains infinite planes of existence or transfinite planes of existence is high 1b, when already contains smaller local multiverses that are easily debatable, not even debatable, they are easily easily 1a and higher. Or even worse, the yggdrasil is stated to contain surreal levels of infinity's existence by Dr. Strange. Remember what infinitesimals are? Yeah, you still have surreal statements which further backs everything up. Or the seed of yggdrasil being beyond all math and language, which is beyond all logic. Is that also high 1b? That's fucking boundless. Or someone stated to reduce beyond the infinitesimals to his very essence, went down to the very fabric of creation, meaning he went below transfinite levels of infinitesimals to the point his essence went down to the dawn of creation. Is that also high 1b? Or eternity and infinity, which represent time and space, all that is to be the physical actualizations are not representation of the cardinal concept of space and time. Is that also high 1b? And remember that irrational numbers are responsible for the science behind space, time, energy, and matter, which makes this more concrete. Or Nate Gray and few others going to reality where these beings, not sure if they're celestials but might be, couldn't even recognize them because they was lower than the lowest creatures of the infinite spectrum, and Nate Gray is extremely powerful. He's constantly compared to Kid Franklin Richards, who arguably solos your favorite verse. Cubic telling Cosmos that they are in the 4D realm as we see them grow their size bigger than planets. Then he tells her that it is a congruence of spheres or layers with each nestled inside the other in an infinite convergent series, which are ordinals and cardinals of infinite dimensional construct, alongside the one we have earlier for the local multiverse aspect. This is another, as well as this scan talking about cubic going to Earth and affecting all existence of infinite dimensions and adjacent universes, which is the local multiverse and not beyond it. So you guys need to pay attention as we move. You also know why there's a local multiverse, because all universes that are adjacent to Earth and contains infinite dimensions aren't beyond the local multiverse. So please stop saying that. If you don't even stop saying Marvel is high 1b, just local multiverse, just universes are high 1b, the superflow still is beyond that. Please stop. The term dimensions and universes in Marvel would be addressed later on clearly. Cubic then ascends to the scale of high 1b constructs and got so big, beings like the Dark Phoenix couldn't fathom them, but they could grab the attention of the Watchers by transcending higher. Watchers can fight on infinite planes of existence, and even higher to the point the Unimind, the Celestials, the Vishanti could notice them. And we already know this, like Doctor Strange here, and we already know how it is as shown a bit earlier. When higher beings can't see you because you are insignificant to them, even in their realms, like Nate Gray, and yet they're still insignificant to them. But not like Nate Gray's instance, the gap between Nate and those beings were worse than infinitesimals, to the point they leave eternity. Now we see why Cosmos asks why eternity is insignificant to her. It is because Cubic is just explaining transcendental hierarchies to her. When he says at that size they was insignificant. Normally Cubic is actually on the same tier as the Shaper of Worlds, which is beyond eternity, at the point beyond where beyond us are from. And then what we see Cubic tell Cosmos that they are about to cross the fourth dimensional barrier of this plane of the outside, which acts as a plane of existence and not normal 4D. As explained earlier before this, and we know cubic just transcended from 4D and high 1B constructs within few scans back. And then cubic says that the universe is vast and infinitesimal, and whatever plane you encompass could be the highest plane, as power is an illusion. But we do know that Marvel is extremely vast, and this is so much proof, which is consistent that you can use finite quantifications, but like within each finite quantification, there are like infinite planes infinitesimally transcending each other. Like the Watchers can fight on infinite planes of existence. To them, it's infinite, it's high, but their still beings more powerful than them, and the Watchers are like high autoversal. Or cubic, talking about the odd and even numbers, which represent that of Aleph Null, as examples of the cosmos having countable infinite hierarchies of natural numbers, but beings like them being lower than celestials who are transfinite in comparison to them, meaning the celestials are Aleph 1 in comparison to them, while they are Aleph 0, but not in the literal sense, as we just saw previous scans way worse. I will stop here. God, this is already so long. Oh yeah, and one more thing. The fact that Loki is called the god of anti-axioms, which means he's basically the god of anti-transfinite layers. I mean, as we move on, you know how high Loki actually does scale, and there'll be a Loki video this year. What are the Jungian archetypes and the collective unconscious, and how it blatantly operates in Marvel? Now, I'm gonna drop the definition of the Jungian archetypes. So yeah. Basically, the archetypes are these themes and images of several cultures of man that represent several ideologies that man can't see and couldn't. A lot are like myths. These are thought of by humans from a subconscious awareness which you are aware of but doesn't seem real on a physical level. They come as characters and much more. Even trying to explain it is hard despite it being subconsciously relatable, and most times the best way to express these archetypes is through the collective unconscious, which is this thing that sort of contains all human knowledge, or best explained as things that exist as metaphorical ideas, which do not take shape or form, but we can react to them behaviorally. And that's kind of what archetypes are by Carl Jung. I am really trying to explain it, to be honest. It can even be further easier to relate with by saying it derives from the unconscious mind, which starts from the conscious. And conscious things create unconscious behaviors based on how you react to people, roles, laws, and many more, which have an inner connection to the intangible eidos or ideas of what things should be, as even ideas have become conscious like technology, and the physical can interact with the spiritual through spiritual awareness. One of the most easy way to express unconsciousness that is linked to the conscious awareness is through this thing called dreams. Lucid dreams are more like a perfect example of a conscious awareness that guides an unconscious mind. While dreaming at night is the highest level of awareness you can get if your level of consciousness is very high. You wonder how people sleep and die. You wonder how you see things in your dream and they end up manifesting. It is all the collective unconscious. I really hope I have tried to explain it, but how does this show up in Marvel? Now, you can't talk about Jungian archetypes and collective unconscious if you don't talk about the things that made him realize this theory to start with. They go by 1. The father complex, 2. The mother complex, 3. The king, 4. The queen, 5. The self, 6. The shadow, 7. The persona, 8. The magician, 9. The anima/animus, 10. The tree of life. Know that I have read most of his books myself, so I am very grounded on this. To be honest, I could go way more into detailed explanation, to be honest. Also, I am not going to explain too much of those archetypes you see there, but they will work codependently. Let's see. Let's start with the father complex. The father complex is same thing as the father archetypes, which represents authority, and the father archetype combines the capacity for initiating with the ability to oversee others. Whether a biological family or a group of creative people like staff, a positive father guides and protects those under his care and is able to put ideas into fruition.
Now, the father archetypes in Marvel is Odin. I actually break this down to a good extent in my Odin video, so check it out. Odin is the All-Father. He has many children and basically rules over the cosmos, and also he is literally Marvel's god. He is transcendent to many things and wields a staff. Also, the king is under the father complex, so read it up to also get the full context. If you move deeper, you see more things pop up. The mother archetypes represents love and care, and all mother of not just man but nature. Everyone knows what a motherly care is or should be like. And in Marvel we have Gaia, who is the mother archetype, and she is the mother of all gods. She is nature. She is the head of the all mothers, while she is still singularly an all mother, because even the all mother squad are unironically her children. And she is the true bride of Odin and mother of Thor, who has the archetypes of the divine child, likely to become the father archetype later on, and even stronger, which follows Thor's exact role of wielding the Odin force and becoming king, while Loki is the shadow of the divine child as the rival to Thor. If you observe well, we have already covered the self archetype and the shadow alongside the king and queen and wands, alongside the persona. Just go read on them. We also have covered the anima/animus, because to even talk about male and female, be it father and mother, you are involving the anima and the animus, because both fathers and mothers have characters of the opposite gender in them. If not, men will be totally ruthless and women will be too soft and caring. That's why a father even cares to start with, and a woman also can be a queen and a warrior, and women can be extremely dangerous. Now, as for things like the magician, this is totally dependent on who is the magician or the role you play, if you have to be or not for protective reasons. A father archetype and mother are also easily magicians like Odin and Gaia with the runes and much more. Now let's dive in more into the cosmology and see how it plays out. We will take it step by step from Carl Jung's work. Now, of course, I'll be placing the stuff on the screen and explain it. So as you can see, you read this, and what this is talking about is that in Marvel, it follows the same exact lore. The world tree in Marvel, which is the same exact lore, in which yggdrasil exists on every plane of existence, and there are infinite planes. Each yggdrasil is connected to heaven and hell, but this really differs because there's a true yggdrasil and there's one at the peak edge of eternity, which is Asgardian yggdrasil. Now the yggdrasil which the Norse gods stay in is connected to all of creation alongside other realms and godly realms, because I suppose each godly realm has its own yggdrasil like the Greek pantheon does. But I guess not, since Seth went hunting for that of the Norse gods. Now, the true Norse tree follows the theory of Kabbalah, which at the top, beyond it, is the mystery, the unknown, the undefined for sure, and below it would be the below place of the one below all, while the above place or mystery would be that of the avatar of the one above all, which still represents God. And the Norse tree of the Norse pantheon follows the same thing, as the place above is heaven, and the one below is the Norse mythology hell. Now, the world tree has been called the Axis Mundi since the times of classic comics to date, and it is connected to the Axis Mundi as the Greeks, for the Greeks, which Atlas holds. It is all the same story but of different pantheons, but I explained this story myth in my Thor and Odin video. The Axis Mundi is linked to the other world, the nexus of all realities via the recurrent crystal and the exospace. And we also have seen yggdrasil existing in hell, on earth, and in upper cosmos, which is Asgard, which is heaven for the gods. Now, how do I know about the realms of that tier with the gods? The world tree burning is capable of burning down other worlds, in which is also a pan-dimensional nexus point for the cosmos, where, as shown earlier, eternity and infinity can be viewed with their hierarchical cardinals. The Mikran crystal is linked to all of creation, and you can argue that through these realms you can view eternity in its true form, which is true for the most part because the Mikran crystal can send omniversal waves, in which multi-eternity is the lower omniverse. Not the lower omniverse, but like the omniverse, but not the higher omniverse. Let me put it like that. And from there you can get to all parts of creation, and to even get there you have to pass through infinite dimensions of existence or planes. Of course, by now you know I am not referring to high 1B constructs. From the Yggdrasil tier of Asgard, making Yggdrasil bleed is as good as ending eternity. From the top of Yggdrasil of the Norse pantheon, Odin can scream and all of creation will hear him and sing for hell below. The White Hot Room is the home of the true Phoenix Force who can burn creation, and this White Hot Room is within the Nixus, and beating her is synonymous to ending creation, and Jane Foster did with Proud of Thor's power. And this also consistent when you think of it like beings like, you know, Kaithri and Shara with the keys can end all of creation, and then their power is related to that of the Phoenix Force. Also know that the cosmic axis, which is in the Swamp Nixus, and Swamp Nixus is a part of the Mikran, can literally hold the cosmic axis, where an embody of the Living Tribunal beyond the 16th dimension, the 16th super space dimension of transcendence, which is still the realm of manifestation that can produce infinite transfinite embodies of eternity. This living tribunal is still further here. So this tier is pretty high into high multiversal and arguably boundless. These entire things follow the lore and concept of the Jungian archetype. Now we move on to this called the transcendental tree, the world tree / world axis, you know, the Kabbalah. Yeah, that's it, that's what I'm talking about. So this is it on the screen. This is from his book, and it is called the transcendental tree, which means beyond all mathematics and language, which is also part of Marvel, as the Yggdrasil seed is beyond all math and language, which is beyond high into high multiversal eternity, and even realms beyond it as it encompasses them. This is easily boundless. The next thing we have the serpent. You know, this is from his book as well, so I placed this here, and this is quite some text. So as much as this is so simple in Marvel that it talks about the serpents of these mythological aspects of the serpents, like Seth, who wants to get rid of the Norse gods by destroying the world tree and even Odin's brother. The serpents also exist on every plane of existence, and finally the serpent, which is Odin's brother, and he is Odin's opposite, the dark side of the father archetype. Then this is another one which still talks about the knowledge, the tree of life being having all knowledge, from his book, and this still follows this normal lore of the world tree from Marvel, as the tree of life is called the tree of all knowledge and wisdom. Then we have this from his book, which is referring to other pantheons and universal structure, you know, the underworld and other things. Just read it. So it follows the same exact lore. Even the nexus of all realities is linked to it because of Adam Kadmon and the Book of Life. That's also the Christian part of it, but I don't want to go there. You all get the message by now. I will link the documentary that helped my work, you know, my workload on this. So before we move, it is important to note that Odin is called the All God, and the seed of the Yggdrasil is called the soul of the All God. And for those still in serious doubt and are looking for Carl Jung's name stated in Marvel Comics directly, well, I have a buttload for you, to be honest. Now, the Marvel Tarot is an exact copy of the Jungian Tarot deck, which Carl Jung referenced for each card in his book, in explaining his 4 main archetypes and other ones as subsets to them, like Magician, the Cop, the Lover, the Jester, the Demon, the Fool, and much more. Marvel basically used its characters to show the reference and implications of the archetypal nature of them with the cosmology. Check the deck. About half or relatively half are Marvel characters, and you can see Man-Thing representing the world, which has to do with the man of lineages, and I will briefly bring that up soon. Man, this whole thing just gets better and better. Now we have Man-Thing as the world. Man-Thing is one of the man of lineages who is like a child to the divine creator and sees beyond conception and all planes of reality. He has even challenged the dream of the divine creator. He formed the true nexus of all realities, which came from the combined love of Plato and Adam Kadmon. Even Plato represents a mother archetype as the Holy Mother, as she can sing a song across all of reality. Her song can erase all things between self and others, between all beings and things, while Kadmon came after her, but yet Gaia still was there before them and Odin. Check my Man-Thing video, I go really deeply on this. Also my Thor and Odin video. This same Adam Kadmon is referred to as the archetypal man. Also, Carl Jung has been mentioned in a Carnage reference comic. As you can see in the scan, he has been mentioned and explained in this Demon Hellstrom run. We talked about like the Jungian effects of hell and the collective unconscious, and there are infinite amount of hells in Marvel for those who do not know. Also note that the yggdrasil contains stories basically, and the branches stretch infinitely even to hero and villains, which is the hero and villain archetypes. Loki is referred to metaphorical story and archetypal. The Dreamtime, the Nightmare realm, the Sleepwalker's realm, all deal with imagination and dreams to manifest things. You know, you have the Scroll Dreamtime, you have dream for every alien race. My Sleepwalker video will help, and also my future Nightmare video. All these are within the collective unconscious, which is just a dream to the divine creator, as the dream of the divine creator transcends archetypes and ideas, which is beyond the yggdrasil and even greater into boundless. As gods originate from these, eternity gets killed and immediately comes back from imagination. Eternity also gets killed and was created in the land of Kurubi Shouldn't via imagination and possibility of the Never Queen as a sub-true collective unconscious, as nothing ever truly dies. So how about we go over Plato's forms in Marvel, the superflow, and some things on the yggdrasil. I want to give a shout out to Proper for helping me with the Plato's parts. I was too lazy to do it myself. Shout out to Proper, shout out to Zestando for some few scans I got from him, and shout out to Primordial Alias. Damn, this dude has been one of the best Marvel dudes for like having scans for like this yggdrasil stuff and like the Ars Guardians. Trust me, there's almost no scan he doesn't have. Now, for Plato's forms, we have all of them are a fundamental parts of reality which are incomprehensible to human bounds. And these are the scans here. All is real, all is true, all is an illusion. These fundamental things are applied to the universes and cosmos, which are all beyond space and have different dimensional planes. Extra scans for that. Platonic forms being applied to universes in how all the planes are involved within the phenomenon. This is a scan for it. There are more planes and more realities that have Platonic forms as well, being established with godhood. There are realities and possibilities of realities converging and breaking the boundaries between reality and imagination. How universes and planes have Platonic forms in Plato's book is portrayed as an intangible faction of a higher realm/plane, but it's not ever contained within the material, or as in layman terms, those of the spatial-temporal. But in Marvel, this is similar because there's a cosmic axis, and then there are layers to realities with different structures and different levels. There are realms and several states of being in between existence and outside realities, having seemingly innumerable structures contained in states of nullity, all within oblivion, in all directions, described as both unness and nowhere. Moreover, the congress of all realities is located within the fabric of reality, which leads straight into infinity, which would mean Platonic forms in Marvel are but a part of infinity and within infinity. The very conception of gods alone stick in Thera, a place beyond the realities, yet have no gods in their definition, a testament that gods are several infinities, or at least greater than Platonic forms in Marvel. When Man-Thing makes mere contact with a mere dog in the realm of Theria, creates several realities and an entire spectrum of them, causing a new existence expanding onto all existence to be made, and had created every color and sound and sensation there is or ever will be. Keep in mind there are Platonic wars and humanity was eliminated as a Platonic concept. Conceptual beings in Marvel are a heavy case, even complex to pre-reckon beyond, and comprehension in general more real than they are, so they create forms and allow others to create forms of them to interact or communicate in some way. Speaking of which, higher beings such as those in the planes as realms of gods see the reality of mortals as an illusion. Shumagorath and eternity are mentioned and noted on those lines of beings. The abstracts are at comprehensible level considered conceptual beings. So Marvel does contain Platonic concepts and Platonic archetypes and Jungian archetypes, but the thing is that Jungian archetypes are more profound in Marvel, but Platonic archetypes are there. Now moving on. Now the superflow. The superflow is a higher plane of reality. It is the psychic buffer zone between universes where your dreams live. It is where concepts and aspects of the multiverse can use their full power without damaging normal space. On this level of existence, combat is metaphor, a clash of ideas. When Lifebringer existed on this form, he was able to damage Master Order's narrow system, his boundaries and categories, causing them and him to lose meaning. Multiple aspects live in the superflow. The superflow is the highest plane of reality and is the highest space of dreams and vision. It is the space between universes where the god machines of the ancient spin endlessly. This is where living concepts live and make war, supported by the maker's statement. It is a realm of abstract entities. It is filled with information, and again, it is stated to be space between universes. The superflow is a conceptual space. At this level, combat is metaphor, and you can see existential concepts punch each other. This is where primal aspects all exist. Now, for the metaphor part and stuff, that's for like the Nixos superflow, the top. While for the machine part, like space between universes, that's the superflow that holds the high 1B multiverses. Now, let's dive in some things about the yggdrasil. Let's start with the cosmic egg. In the time before time, there was the world heart, the heart of the omniverse itself. It ended the era of the long now by giving forth the omniverse as we know it to be. It was in the roots of everything, of the true yggdrasil, the cosmic axis. The world tree seed is more like an egg. This egg, by the way, connects to the cycle of the omniverse, as I will show later. It is older than the omniverse and more powerful. From it comes many things. Odin has wanted it for a very long time, and is as old as this omniverse itself. It is a super dense cosmic heart plucked from space-time itself, an artifact of the time before time. It will predate and outlast the Silver Surfer and even Odin. Its power and energy is beyond the boundaries that even language and mathematics can't explain. It is the eternal soul of the All God. This thing can sate Galactus forever, ending his eternal hunger. Odin explains that the world heart, the seed plucked from the ruptured roots of the world tree, shall bring forth the next cosmic beings, like Galactus, a new cosmic ether, and the next omniverse. Then we have Axis Mundi. I've mentioned quite a lot already, but there are multiple aspects of the world tree, one for each pantheon on Earth. Now, let's go into this scientist, this weird dude, Eric Solvang. As stated by the quantum cosmologist Eric Solvang, the Asgard world tree is like a map, okay? The 9 worlds you recognize as a part of Yggdrasil are just the tip of maybe infinite iceberg. And I'm quoting him, by the way. What you know as worlds are universes, complex, discrete, fully formed. Now, some may claim this as nonsense from a babbling mad scientist due to Thor's statements. But Thor wasn't even denying that the realms were universes. He was telling Eric to go away because he said that the Asgardians don't belong there. In the next issue, Baldur confirms that Dr. Solvang was indeed right, as Iron Man went to him, thinking that the Asgardians don't understand, but in actuality, Baldur did understand Eric, as he later states, "Ah, Volstag's small man with big thoughts. Yes, he is right, we know." In fact, Odin, the very god who gave his eyes to Yggdrasil, confirms and states this. The tree that is everything, that has its roots and branches in all that is. There are 10 realms in this reality, 10 spheres, 10 universes, and the tree winds through them all, through every star and planet, every hero and villain, every story. This confirms that the realms are indeed universes. However, that is not all. The realms have different sizes, such as Niflheim, also called Niflheim, the primordial realms of ice and the dishonored dead, and the home of hell, Niflheim, as stated by Lady Armor of the Pleasure Lands. Niflheim is the largest realm in all existence and by far the most populated because everyone who has ever died resides here on these frozen shores. Now, there are statements of them only being 10 realms, but there are statements to suggest that there are more. Of course, they are just talking about the main realms of the Yggdrasil. As you already know, creation is in it. So, what do you mean by only 10 realms? Yeah, infinite planes of existence. I don't want to go back there, but let me still address what needs to be addressed. Let's go back to Dr. Volsang, who states that there are infinite universes, infinite possibilities, and infinite realms. There's a universe where Volstagg and he never existed. A universe where Volstagg is the smart one and is telling this to Solvang. Or a universe where they are both dead. Anything that can exist does exist within the grand scheme of space-time. A quantum metaverse. That is what the Asgardian aspects of Yggdrasil is. Basically, space-time contains infinite universes as it states that there are an infinite amount of universes within it, or its grand scheme. Now, later on, we're going to be going over these terms called microverse, macroverse, metaverse, megaverse, omniverse. Right now, just know that the entirety of the Yggdrasil, the Asgardian Yggdrasil, is like a metaverse, but it also is linked to eternity as an omniverse, which we'll get to later on. Then I'll explain the microverse and stuff later on, and I'll drop scans for the megaverse. But man, Marvel is large. Back to what I was saying. So it says that is what the Asgardian aspect of Yggdrasil is. Basically, space-time contains infinite universes as or dimensional or planes of existence, as it states that there are an infinite amount of universes within it, or its grand scheme. And Thor states that the Asgardian world tree spans space and time, growing in directions of what we can scarcely conceive. The world tree is very much a living thing, a complex and chaotic system, turbulent and changing. This is supported by Heimdall, who says, "All of space and time laid out before me, the whole of the world tree and its branches, infinite in its complexities and yet so simple to my starry eyes." This also isn't a one-off statement, as Heimdall has consistently used space and time, and the past, present, and future, stated not twice but thrice, and to describe the span of his senses. Ares, a god who knows Heimdall as an ally, says that Heimdall can see and hear as far as creation. That statement is actually supported by the fact that trying to carve out your dead lover from the Asgardian world tree, not that you'd have a lover, just an example, would cause the destruction of all of creation, warping every reality with a great wave. The toll grates on all of reality, the death rattle of the firmament itself, transforming time and space. It wasn't one world, nor one reality Thor and company saved. It was all worlds and all realities, which is also one of things that links the Yggdrasil with eternity in terms of tearing. Supported by the fact that Odin hid the true size of the Asgardian world tree and its amount of universes, as stated by Thor in Thor the World Eater storyline. Odin, it seems, knows more about the celestial clockwork more than he'd ever shared with anyone. Odin knows of dark things beyond the veil of space-time itself, starved universes scratching at the doors of our own. Now let's get to size. Now, the Asgardian yggdrasil has been stated to span space and time, as I said earlier, but it is also transdimensional and exists on every plane of reality simultaneously, supported by the fact it contains Anno-Anthox, the realm of the world eaters, which is transdimensional. As you can see, that is a clear higher dimensional scaling that is high into high multiversal, just and arguably boundless. As stated by Seth, there are infinite planes of time and space, and by planes they mean planes of existence, and due to that, this makes it a higher dimensional, and that scan is supported by Baldur saying, or is he lost amid the endless streams of time and space? And this is again supported by the fact that there are infinite levels of the mainstream Marvel Multiverse. It is supported by the fact that Seth was going to use Asgard as a stepping stone to invade every other plane of reality, ravaging the multiverse itself, riding it of and ridding it of all life. Another thing that supports yggdrasil being higher dimensional is the fact that the negative zone in subspace, which is composed of infinite higher dimensions, is within the vision of Heimdall. I mean, this isn't so like key, but yeah. Yggdrasil also encompasses Avalon, also known as Otherworld, as burning Yggdrasil would burn Otherworld. Otherworld, by the way, is one of the primary intersections of reality. From there, you can access any points along the sidereal string that ties creation together. And Otherworld connects to the whole of the multiverse, causing everything with a capital to burn. And then, everything is actually in the multiverse is like a game to it. And you can view eternity and infinity blatantly from there, as they are the cardinals. I said this earlier. Yggdrasil obviously has roots, as all trees should have. However, the Asgardian world tree has roots that, and I quote, stretch as far as the underworld. It also has three main roots, one which the dragon Nidhogg feeds upon. This is exactly from like the Jungian stuff and like the real mythology, which the dragon Nidhogg feeds from. The other extending onto hell, and the final main roots end or begins in a way, as the words mean the same in this place here near the lake of Order. A quote from Thor also revealed the riches of the roots. He says, I love this tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots and branches sprout the nine realms. And then he says, the tree connects all life. Above is our future, and yet the future is made below, woven below by the nuns in the twisted roots of Yggdrasil. They know our endings and beginnings. In fact, a mere root of it bridges the realms of life and death. Also, the root of Yggdrasil contains the same space-time embodying liquid. So this means the mere root of Yggdrasil too contains infinite universes. Another thing is that the roots and branches connect all the worlds. They bind the cosmos as they grow. Now, Odin created heaven and earth. Then this is explanation for the Norse worlds. Odin created heaven and earth, all the realms, everything and all of creation. And the Asgardian world tree, those are synonymous to the world. Because of the scans, Odin created the world with his bare hands. Flames. Now this is kind of important as well. The flames, everything was burning when the world tree burned. Again, these flames threatened the world tree. These flames were hinted to be the strongest flames that Surtur ever made. All realms were threatened, not just the nine realms. These flames were hinted to be as powerful as the Big Bang that started everything. And check from the Marvel book, that's referring to a firmament, quantification, a whole eternity size Big Bang. That is, I don't even want to keep saying like high into hell reverse, so you should get the message by now. These flames were hinted to be as powerful as the Big Bang that started everything. When the world tree burned, so will Avalon, and Avalon connects to all magic, all other realms. To strike a match in Avalon will make all realities whatever, all universes kindling. Surtur forged all of creation into the very thing that shall undo it. undoing the world tree would undo all of creation. Burning yggdrasil would burn otherworld, which would burn the multiverse. When the angels sacrificed themselves, the fuses in all of realities were cut. All that power went back to Surtur, and now he has enough power to burn the multiverse, and only Odin can nullify them. All the fire of creation was released when Thor killed Surtur, and Odin nullified it all. These flames were implied to be the ones that tie into the omniversal cycle. Odin then casually held these flames in his bare hands. Valhalla is also the void. Now let's go into the Marvel book scaling to support previous claims. The Marvel book was published in 2019, and you can see the description of it on the screen. Read it. This definitely is canon, as it was specifically made to explain the cosmology. And now I will be using both soft copy images from the Kindle and real pictures taken from it to explain and justify all that has been said to this point. Also note that this isn't the first time they have done this, as they almost release a guidebook every year since the 90s, which has helped a lot in scaling. Marvel authors behave like anime authors that have guidebooks and novels. But this particular book was made to clear up misconceptions on the cosmology, of course, all written with the context and understanding of what the comics have portrayed for the past 80 plus years of comics. Let's start with the introduction of the Marvel cosmology. Now, of course, I won't be reading everything on the screen, but I will try my best to cover the important things while you guys have the scans on the screen. It starts off with the fact that the omniverse is composed of endlessly proliferating or rapidly increasing multiverses and universes that are kept apart by a highly reactive form of informational space called the superflow, just as explained before. Now, this is referring to just eternity because the iterations are called omniverse a lot of times and have codependent power scaling to imply such. That would be shown when we move to the iterations and talk about eternity alone. This is exactly what I explained at the first aspect of this video. The superflow holds an infinite amount of multiverses, with each containing infinite universes and timelines, with each multiverse being high 1b at least. Now, the superflow does exist as a nexus, as the true superflow scales far above this, but that will be shown later. Which is referring to just eternity because the iterations are called omniverse a lot of times and have codependent. As you read the part of the white event, to further back this claim of dimensions from the video, the Marvel book states itself that these universes or multiverses are within the superflow, links to and forms a network of dimensions, subdimensions, and planes made up of fundamental forces that are surrounded by ethereal, largely inaccessible mystical realms. These realms are inhabited by beings able to circumvent the natural, rationalistic laws of the physical matter. Almost all dimensions, planes, realms, and realities, with the notable exception of limbo, experience time in a linear fashion. Now, this is where it even gets more serious. So this multiverse within the superflow links to and forms dimensions, subdimensions, and planes. Let's stop here and explain. I personally don't see need to explain every bit of thing, but some people really would just look for one incoherent thing to take out of context. They link to dimensions and form a network of dimensions, meaning that these multiverses, as explained, have infinite dimensions, which was stated not so long ago, in which these infinite amounts of multiverses are connected to and form a connection between each multiverse. Subdimensions are just smaller pocket realms, and now they clearly denote that dimensions and planes of existence here are different because it is true. The way the superflow works, like I said before, is different. It has a nexus point which is above many layered realities, while the one in the local multiverse goes through a white event. That one doesn't, and that's where concepts make war. Now, The book says that these dimensions, subdimensions, and planes up to the superflow, despite of their placement, are ethereal, largely inaccessible mystical realms. Now, the amount of mystical realms in Marvel is just enormous, and each realm is largely or strongly inaccessible. Just as proven prior to this, each realm is an alley of transcendence. Now, the term surrounded doesn't invalidate anything, as it says these dimensions, subdimensions, of course, which are stacked upon each other, as that's how realms in Marvel are, as shown already. Planes of existence are usually above another. That's why they are planes. These strongly or largely inaccessible realms surround these planes, which are a lot in number, infinite in number, meaning for each plane there's an inaccessible adjacent realm to it, made for beings that circumvent or avoid the natural and rationalistic laws of the physical matter. Although this gets more fun when you understand context and terms. They avoid the natural laws of space-time, energy, and matter. Also, they avoid the rationalistic laws of physical matter. Basically means they avoid cardinality to whatever extent they get. As for the time part, in Marvel this is shown that time is relative but still differs based on power, as Galactus shows it. Everyone experiences time relatively from a broad plane scale, but conceptually and cardinally they experience it transfinitely based on your ranking. I really hope I didn't confuse anyone. This was shown in the ultimate run, and these are the scans. On to the next scan. Read this till you get to where it says through all levels of creation. Now I did jump some part, but like doesn't really matter. But meaning, of course, there are layers in creation and differ by power, which are transcendental via aleph numbers and not just transcendental. Now it stated that the multiverse is buffered by infinite quantum realities, most accessed by the material world by shrinking, which is why buffered is used even in the first place. It has to do with shock reduction, or basically implying the reduction of charges of a body or thing. For someone to go to other realities, you need quantum reduction, and that's why they are in the microverse, which itself is a quantum state of the multiverse. But this would be explained better as we move. It is divided into disparate realms like subatomica and few others I will point out later. And here the gap between science and magic is smaller. This is gonna get a brief explanation about probably. The microverse is similar to this as well, but it is above multiversal physicality, and beyond these exist the higher planes of abstract beings and those mortals that have ascended. Now I will head back to this page because it is very important to understand the cosmology easily. But this is the Marvel cosmology map in its simplest format. But this is for quantum, these are just for quantum realms, but it still kind of encompasses everything. But as we move, you understand. Now you see this multi-earth thing. It is the local multiverse which we have been talking about, and the book follows the comics like I have been doing since the start. Each earth has its universe, which then form infinite multitude, becoming individual multiverses for reasons explained already several times over with proof. And then they form a greater multiversal structure known as a local multiverse. Now this scan is actually the initial one before the previous one we just discussed. This basically talks about how Earth acts as a nexus, because the swamp nexus is indeed on Earth, and other trans-dimensional realms are linked to it. The macroverse, underspace, and overspace are progressively becoming singular planes that have layers in them, which are connected to the local multiverse and superflow. Now this is the map again I like to see, which helps a lot in explaining things better. The map we saw prior to this was basically for major planes. So this diagram here explains that Earth is the focal point, and this isn't new at all, as it predates a lot of things. The yggdrasil initially sprang from its creation in total, and Silver Sulfur thus still states this. I will let you read it as these have been explained already, but remember when I said I was gonna talk about the rational realms linked to the dimensions of superflow? Well, we see that they explicitly state that realms like the fifth dimension, which are science-based, and rational dimensions are infinite dimensions, in which they use fifth dimension as an example. So that's still more proof of infinite dimensions. And these realms, they know it all started from prime Earth, and then other realms have infinite dimensions and like infinite universes and timelines. So that's easily how 1B for each multiverse. Come on. To be honest, I will stop here for the Marvel book. In other sections, things will expand better.
True yggdrasil and the iterations. So after hearing all about the normal yggdrasil of the multiverse below the outside, before I start explaining briefly what the true yggdrasil is, remember when I stated that Odin actually hid the real size of the Asgardian world tree? Well, that's true for the most part when you consider the feats that scale relative, if not above eternity, which almost all the feats I mentioned were about that level. And when you even think about it more, the world tree we see in these realms are just physical representatives of the cosmic tree of each plane of reality, which are infinite, and the yggdrasil is also another reason for each plane being transcendental, because we do know how the verse works again. And the yggdrasil is transcendental, and its nature abiding law hasn't changed despite the plane of reality. And Odin in this scan literally entered that world tree on Earth and then entered the cosmos back to Asgard. Or in the current Thor run, as the multiverse as a whole was getting negged by true death, aka the Black Winter, the Yggdrasil of the Norse pantheon was dying, showing a physical representation of what was happening. Now, true Yggdrasil is very shown pop and plain. The term true wasn't used for it, but if something exists in multiplicity, then there must be a start and end, which would be a focal or nexus point. There must be where something originates from to become multiple. Now, the true Yggdrasil is basically above eternity in very simple terms. It holds everything up to the far shore, and this is where things start getting interesting. I would want to spill the beans on what I need to talk on about codependently to other things, but I won't leave you guys hanging. The far shore is the farthest edge of conceptuality in Marvel, beyond the land of couldn't be shouldn't be, and above Ginnungagap, the yawning void. Knowing how overpowered Odin is, and he is the father complex alongside being Marvel's actual god, except from the one above, or like, they're like levels. How will I put it? Just like the presence is god of DC, but he's far from the most powerful. He's not even making the top 10 list of most powerful people in DC. Probably not top 30. Kind of the same thing here. Odin gained this from the level of true Yggdrasil, which is the place the well of Mimir is from, and the thread fades. King Thor one-shots this tree, and literally all of Marvel went with it, which includes the gods above in shadows, be it Ginnungagap, they stayed in, or actually the land of Kudubi Shudubi, but during Secret Wars, which I will get to now. The shadow gods literally was feeding on the narrative of the Norse pantheon. Once you can feed on their narrative, the narrative of the cosmos is unironically nothing, considering the fact that even places like Otherworld is within this tree, and eternity is arguably this tree, well, not the tree, but in his rightful nature. I am referring to the Asgardian tree, which literally contains creation and infinitesimal Yggdrasils below it for infinite realities. They fed from it, and Odin asked them a simple question a lot of fans tend to ignore, simply being that, why aren't they dead? And they simply said something true, because this is a new Ragnarok. We do know that Ragnarok is the cycle of birth and of death and rebirth, which has taken place only about 8 or 9 times, simply referring to the fact, no, it hasn't taken place 8 or 9, it has taken place infinite amount of times, actually, simply referring to the fact that when the multiverse dies,
every true form of every character comes back, and so does the true yggdrasil. And that's why the shadow gods keep coming back. Every form of Loki that isn't the most canon, as the way the child Loki was, or classic, or god of stories, then they are just avatars, like Loki states here. So, as there are many Thors, there are many Yggdrasils. And this is consistent as when Ragnarok came. Thor destroyed the multiverse and took eternity's place and still scaled far beyond what eternity can dream of. Or when Loki told a story about true Yggdrasil without including the shadow gods in it and they died. Or the whole point of Secret Wars itself for Ragnarok to happen. Or the story of God the God Butcher as he nearly caused something worse than Ragnarok. And even almost destroyed eternity but turned him to all black, the Necroverse. Now, I did a video on Eternity and the Never Queen, which I won't fully address here because you gotta watch those videos, even if they're boring in a way, to be honest. But they have very crucial information. But I will brief some things here, right? Eternity and other iterations only exist not even because of imagination per se, though it is solely on that, but because of possibilities which birth from true imaginations of what could be, what can be, and what might be, which are all thought forms, but on the level of the Never Queen, as they are all dependent on belief. Despite the fact I have spoken already on the collective unconscious and the tree, I want to bring up a few more things to support this collective unconscious stuff. Remembering what the collective unconscious is and how it plays out in the verse with the archetypes, well, as much as eternity is shaped from imagination and beliefs, the result of his existence is the manifestation of ideas, which makes him the collective consciousness, and this is stated a decent amount of times, but I got about 3 scans here. Final reminder of the collective unconscious in Marvel, look at these scans. It says that if they are lucky, they will be able to connect to unconscious thoughts and dreams of the entire universe from their conscious thoughts or awareness, or the fact that they thought if the thought of the collective unconscious to be a big place and perception became reality, and that's what happened. The collective unconscious is very much connected to dreams, thoughts, and possibilities in Marvel. They all work codependently. We have the realm of madness, the dream time for every race, nightmare realm, the mindscape, and dream of the divine creator. Now let's talk about the seed of Yggdrasil for like the 3rd or 4th time, or the cosmic egg in relation to eternity. We have already touched up on it not so long ago, but this time we will be introducing the Marvel book to back up those previous claims which were directly from the comics. Well, the cosmic egg is kind of weird, but it is this thing that birthed the iterations after everything dies, and it's actually linked to eternity and the true Yggdrasil at the same time. It is connected to Odin's essence as the soul of the All God, which only Odin can understand, and it is more powerful than the omniverses or multiverses or iterations. I mean, eternity is too transfinite that he has transfinite amounts of embodies because each plane of existence is treated as a universal context and not inherently a normal way we view a universe. And this has been addressed severally in this video. Eternity has infinite planes stacked, and we do know eternity is relative to some realms and possibly is within the Asgardian Yggdrasil, which as you can see in the scans holds infinite planes stacked, and I've shown this before, I think. Now this is further consistent when you even bring infinity herself into the equation, because infinity and eternity are relative or synonymous. Infinity gave Quasar part of her power as an embody. Note that Quasar is far from father. This dude can literally make it as high as the realm of manifestation with no problem, which is within eternity. But at that level of realm of manifestation, this is also known as overspace, which is one of the peak realms in eternity. Carson normally is one of those people that knows he can get high into multiverse, high in the multiverse, but not everyone that is this powerful actually understands the functionality of the multiverse, and infinity made him powerful to the point he could actually feel how large an extent of eternity is, which is close to the peak, but realms like Otherworld, North realms, and few others are above it. He felt himself having this infinite power, but the problem was that it wasn't just infinite. It was it felt like it was it was like in maths where there are levels greater than infinity, which he called transfinite. Transfinite forces in the universe, and the universe is transfinite and infinity and infinite layered. And then he compared his transfinite levels of power to be nigh infinite in comparison to an embody of infinity. That's just sick. It is funny how that is nothing close to true oblivion but an avatar of him, which fought an embody of infinity, but they did move from the manifestation realm to the outside, and this scales relative to eternity since he has so much embodies because of how transfinite he is. And we're at the multiverse's final breakdown. I really hope you guys have learned a lot up to this point, or at least convinced that Marvel is not just high 1B or multiversal or universal alone, or just the baseline autoversal. It's one of the most overpowered verses. And now let's get into this. So note that yes, you need infinite layered hierarchies and transfinite cardinality to be peak high autoversal, and going beyond that would be boundless. Just like high 1B and transcending it, which means its cardinality, that is autoversal. Same thing with transcending infinite layered autoversal hierarchies conceptually will give you high autoversal, and same for high outer to boundless, which includes outer of course. Now these statements prove a verse boundless, especially when it is consistent and there are realms beyond it. But there are still realms that would be shown consistently, and there are ways things work. So remember how they gave us the multiverse map and description of finite sense, but without disregarding the layers, or them saying the finite quantifications are any less valuable. Now verses that are extremely large like this can't put everything in a map, so they look for finite ways to quantify their infinite terms, and even then you can't still put do everything in the map. They still had to look for other ways to explain it in the Marvel book. Same thing exists in verses like Cthulhu Mythos, Warhammer, and Elder Scrolls, and also SCP, which I'll be scaling this year, all these verses, so really tune in to be honest. So once again, we'll still be following the Marvel guide and some comics here. Now we will be using these terms: microverse, macroverse, megaverse, omniverse. So I already showed you the metaverse, which has something to do with the yggdrasil. So these have like valuable layers, right? And under them we have classifications of realms. Some are mystical, some are rational, alternate universes or dimensions, abstract, and few more. Let's start with quantum-based realms. Let's start from the crossroads. We know this contains infinite multiverses, infinite dimensions. We have realms like Mojoverse, Cancerverse, Negative Zone, Subspace, and Dimension Z that are within the crossroads. Remember, and also superflow. Remember when I was talking about the microverse and I said I will head back to it? Well, let's head back. Now the microverse has to do with quantum entanglements. Now the microverse is a plane which acts as the basis for matter and energy. It is a realm above the underspace and very similar to it. It requires energies like prime particles to move around, and I myself really don't understand this plane completely, but it contains an infinite amount of universes or dimensions beyond the local multiverse, as we know, just talking about dimensions which are hierarchically stacked up. This alone contains an infinite amount of planes of existence beyond the crossroads that gets to even above outer plus as a whole, which includes the superflow, and we see that superflow is beyond the multiverses as we proved far earlier, and how the crossroads as a whole encompasses the superflow, which are already autoversal at the very baseline, autoversal at the very least. Now some of you may be wondering, like, what's Death Dimension doing there, and The thing is that they're just talking about really important things in the cosmology, because before even getting here, there are a lot of realms to mention which still would. Remember, these are quantum based realms, meaning the realms that are mathematical based, and it is fun because the entire multiverse is based on math and language. It's quantum architecture, which was also stated in the Runking Thor line, and I might bring it up soon. Actually, I'll just put what quantum architecture means in the document in the bio. I have a lot of things for you guys to read, especially with archetypes thing, so make sure you do that. Now let's move. You all will grasp better. Beyond that is the death dimension. Beyond this is the abstract realm of sentient concepts. Beyond that is the overspace, which is a realm above the microverse and its prime particles, which are quantum based. And another name for this place is the realm of manifestation, also a realm of embodies of cosmic abstracts. Next is underspace. It is basically the opposite of overspace, but it is the basis for all levels of existence. Finally, you have the undefined farshore, which is beyond the farshore. You have the mystical realms like Otherworld, Seven Capital Cities of Heaven, Olympus, and Asgard. These realms are connected to Earth despite being so far away, because they're connected to Gaia. You have metaphysical realms. These are the highest abstract and conceptual levels of reality beyond micro and macroverse. You have higher realms. These are nexus-based realms, basically realms that exist on each plane of reality, or relatively so. Now that you have seen this and understand the way it is organized, how about I give you their placements from what we have. Beyond the crossroads is indeed the microverse, which is infinite layered. Then you have the dead dimension. To be honest, I really don't know why this is here, but it could just be her lower realm where her embodied stays in because she's consistently above this. And before getting there are a lot of realms. Then you actually have the macroverse, which exists above multiversal physicality. Nothing much to say about it than it is a reverse of shrinking below the earth but shrinking above it, which it also contains infinite amount of planes. Beyond this is the abstract realm of sentient concept, which is shown below the overspace and underspace. Now this is a realm where these abstracts can go to but as embodies. Then you have the overspace, which is a beyond tangible reality where metaphysical entities or abstract entities go to interact with physical beings. Note that this is relatively the realm used to be known as realm of manifestations. Overspace is the opposite of this, just like microverse and macroverse. After microverse, you get to overspace, and vice versa for microverse and underspace. In fact, the overspace and underspace contain possible transfinite levels of existence actually, because underspace is the basis for such, and overspace is where the abstracts get their embodies. Also, beyond the multiverse, which is the local multiverse, on the level of metaphysical realms, you have superflow itself, which has been spoken about, but this tier is the highest level of informational reality of metaphorical battles and dreams. Beyond this, you have the exospace, the neutral zone. You have rooms that are attached to eternity's being, where you can actually see him fully but not from the outside, and that's where you have the otherworld, Olympus, and Yggdrasil of Norse pantheons, which otherworld is within but part of the realms attached. We have splinter realms. The nexus based realms are things like dreams realm, hells, heaven, astral plane, the collective unconscious, limbo. All these realms exist on each plane of existence. Then you have the top ones of them, which are the peak hierarchies usually shown more. And don't forget that these mystical realms are strongly inaccessible, that to transcend there you need extreme levels of transfinite powers. And then finally, beyond eternity is the land of could be shouldn't be, which has been spoken on, but eternity has no power here. He's like a normal human, and shaper of worlds like a god to him here, including cubic. Beyond this is the farshore, which is so high that even the shaper's ghost nearly ran mad from going there. This is the same shaper that This is the same Shaper's Ghost that is on the same tier as Lifebringer Galactus and even Eternity as the 8th Cosmos. Didn't know the outside where his ultimates or his past iterations stayed in because of the Never Queen, as nothing ever truly died, she kept them there. And Eternity is actually infinitesimally small in comparison to beings from the tier of the God tiers in the outside. And the Far Shore can contain the first firmament that birthed beyond transfinite iterations, in the sense that the destruction of the first one birthed another one, which of course follows the cycle of the cosmic egg and believes as superior, all working naturally as they should codependently. And beyond the land of Kurubi Shurubi, which views eternity as non-existent, is small as shit, to the Far Shore literally infinitesimal again. And beyond that is the unknowable, the undefined Far Shore, which was the last thing in that map. This is where the Never Queen actually stays in, and she brought the Celestials back from belief of her existence as nothing ever dies. They became the 5th host. This realm is also called the outside, and everything beyond eternity is the outside, but they have specific names also. This place is also known as the Beyond, which as you can see here is beyond the Far Shore, which also is beyond conceptuality of conceptual transfinite beings. In fact, beyond beings that can create eternity, who is boundless by existence, as his outer body exists in the outside, but the realms inside him gets to peak high outer reversal. This realm is beyond the true yggdrasil. This beyond realm is the realm of the one above all's avatar, as the above place of 4th name. And you have the below place, last layer of hell, the least place in Marvel, but still like boundless. And in between it is the true yggdrasil, which at the top of it is the Far Shore, and no one knows the bottom per se. Not at the top, but like at the peak inside. And then beyond the outside, it keeps getting more fun. You have no other than the God of Space, which is totally beyond the multiverse. In fact, all this I just mentioned is non-existent fiction that needs to be drawn, and Gwenpool's realm is tied to this, and it is called Earth TRN565, which is beyond everything. In fact, from her universe you can view everything in Secret Wars. The beyond realms, everything is basically fiction. The Shadow Gods, Rocking Thought tier, everything which Gwen just reads for fun. And the God of Space is still beyond the time and space of her universe, which dwarfs the Marvel universe totally, and this her universe views it from a true fictional transcendent view, and God of Space still conceptually transcends this totally. Beyond this is what we know as the House of Ideas. The house is, in simple terms, is so huge that it has infinite doors too. Infinite doors from the multiverse, but most common place to get there is from the omnipotent city, which seems to be above even Yggdrasil because it is the center of infinity for the gods. And this is very likely because from the halls of all-knowing, which is within omnipotent city, you can read the future and last events of the cosmos, which is very interesting, which is basically reading Yggdrasil and its stories. So we indeed can say it is in the outside. It is one of the realms there, and I forgot to say this, but Oblivion's true realm lies between the land of Kurumbi Shurumbi and the Far Shore, as implied by the Shaper's Ghost, and notes the Shaper saw beyond Oblivion, but nearly ran mad by the Far Shore. But yet beings like Mikaboshi is one of the infinitesimals, which is beyond eternity by far, and ranks above Skyfather Zeus, stated to be like Odin tier, and even an embody of Oblivion could literally view the entirety of the multiverse. But this could be contradictory by the Shaper, because that realm could scale from Mikaboshi, who could be like Odin tier, and Gaia is like Divine Creator tier, unironically. So Oblivion is never really consistent, but from how powerful he is and where people scale above, I think he actually scales above the Divine Creator, unironically, or relative. But to be honest, he's still like infinity, eternity, and earth, but eternity is actually the weakest amongst them. But the other abstracts can view Oblivion in full if they can stay in the Far Shore. But that is if you want to lowball Oblivion. It isn't a problem to see his true form. The abstracts are very weird, to be honest. Like, really, especially Oblivion and Death. Now, from there, you have infinite doors, and it is actually infinite. And from there, you get into the house of ideas, and in the omnipotent city, we actually see one, not even in the omnipotent city. I thought it was the omnipotent city where we saw something like an iteration, but know that this is a feast for Thor and Loki, because they can go that high and of course grow as large as an iteration. That, but now it isn't stated that that's an iteration, but one of the ultimates is in there, which is the fourth, who wanders, or could be the fifth because of the hoodie. But this is most definitely an iteration. I don't think there's any other being who literally looks like this, aside from even children of eternity don't look like this, right? And you have levels of children of eternity. You have the, like, the gravity one, but like the real children of eternity and the real eternity is Living Tribunal. You can watch my video on that, my Living Tribunal video. And from here, you need a whole whirlpool to get there. Of course, you need to transcend, and unlike I said not so long, that the halls is in the omnipotent city. In fact, Asgard's library is so big that an iteration can fit in, which further backs the claim that Asgard is beyond eternity. And the omnipotent city is so large that the Asgard library is a facet of the true halls of all knowing, and that still is a facet of the omnipotent city, and that is a facet of the one above all, which is a part of the house of ideas. No, it's above it, because the above all others actually owns the house of ideas, and the above all others is an avatar of true TOAA and works for him, and the true living tribunal works for the true above all others, not the one you saw in that infinity stuff, that bullshit Thanos run. The house is so powerful that it could bring every Marvel character to fight Nyx by making them even more powerful than they are. Now, all these characters are in there, but we can see iterations can be so small in a library that is so large that everything is transfinite on that tier to the previous in terms of realms transcending each other. You have even Man-Thing, who shits on Oblivion, and many, probably not on Oblivion, but relative in tier. And even Nyx being in that house doesn't exclude any character from entering there. A Man-Thing, by the way, is beyond the fracture and is beyond conceptuality, which is beyond Oblivion totally when you lowball. This is Divine Creator tier stuff. Check my Man-Thing video. And from the tier of outside is boundless. And man, it just keeps going, and what makes this baffling is how realms of the outside are alif gaps to each other, meaning their math and reasoning as a whole is on another mathematical class called the absolute infinite power, as we have proven a tier of the continuum hypothesis, and the yggdrasil egg is absolute in power as it is boundless beyond logic. Before we go, I want to make something clear. Look at these scans from Marvel guidebook telling us what terms are like dimensional universes and omniverse. Very important. And an all-encompassing universe can also be classified as an omniverse. The greater omniverse is eternity as a whole, and that's why you see this scan of a universal eternity would rule a boundless universe, and same for multiverse. They mean infinite, though eternity is the omniverse. The larger omniverse is beyond him, while the first omniverse is on ironically the crossroads, which I mentioned earlier. It's actually called the lower omniverse. Well, this is the Marvel cosmology, and I will be creating smaller docs to summarize everything for debaters, or debate purpose, or to prove to someone easily. But to get it will cost you $50, because this is accurate and serious work. I will get the Marvel authors to see this and give their verdict on it. See you all next time. Peace.